Okay, in lesson 3.1, we're going to be learning aggregate demand. So remember how we had demand for a single item like a can of Pepsi, and it had a movement along the demand curve. And then we had demand shifters that were Piper, and those are things which shift the demand curve outward. So now we're going to look at aggregate demand as a whole. So aggregate demand is going to be all the goods and services for the U.S. economy, or any economy in that fashion. So aggregate demand, if we add up all of our SIG-X, our consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports, that would be all the things that are purchased or wanted to be purchased as in quantity in all of an economy. And we always look at things from, the point of view of the United States. So the aggregate demand curve is downsloping. So that means it has an inverse relationship. So as price goes up, aggregate demand would decrease. And when we're talking about price going up, the reason for this down slope is going to be categorized three ways: as the wealth effect, the interest rate effect, and the exchange rate effect. So if prices go up, we know that's inflation. So if inflation happens, for example, let's say your wealth or your money, and we subtract inflation. Now, did your wealth increase or decrease? Well, if price levels are going up, which is inflation, that means that your real money is going to decrease. So as price levels go up, what's going to happen to how much is demanded? This is aggregate demand. So if prices are going up and all of a sudden I go over here and down, I can see that as price went up, aggregate demand decreased to the left. So we would have, once again, a movement along the aggregate demand curve. So if there's any inflation that's making prices go up, we know that aggregate demand would decrease because our real wealth, our real spending power, would be decreased by that inflation, or the price is increasing. And that, again, shows this relationship. Price goes up, demand goes down. We can see it on this graph, this movement right here. Interest rates have the same effect. Interest rates are a price. So the nominal interest rate is a price, and that price is the cost of money. So the cost of money means it's going to cost you money to borrow it. It's going to cost the bank money for you to keep your money in their bank accounts. So savings pay an interest rate. And loanable funds, when they loan it out, pay an interest rate. So these are all prices. Now, if any of these prices go up, if there's inflation, that would make the interest rate go up. Remember, R equals I minus pi. So we know that the real interest rate would decrease, or the real income that would be based off of those interest rates. So once again, if you see something that causes interest rates to go up, that would mean that demand would go down, because that's what we call interest-sensitive consumption. So remember, gross private investment. If interest rates go up, then what's going to happen to investment is it's going to decrease. And investment, remember, is part of SIG-X. So if investment decreases, and this equals aggregate demand, if one component of one thing decreases, on the other side of the equal sign, that's going to decrease as well. So the interest rate effect, the wealth effect, and the exchange rate effect are all going to be things that show the aggregate demand is downward sloping. And this last one, the exchange rate effect, this giant lowercase e, is going to talk about other countries, other economies. So if we're looking at the exchange rate effect, remember this stands for exchange rate. So the effect of the exchange rate would be this. Say in the U.S., our prices increase. And if we are the exporter of goods and services, if our prices go up, other countries are not going to buy our goods and services. So our exports would decrease. And this net exports is exports minus imports. If that happens, we go back over to SIG-X. So let's say our net exports decrease. That's going to lead to aggregate demand decreasing. So once again, if we have inflation in the U.S., then our exports would decrease. And for the exporters, we are making items. Okay? So even the demand for our exports of those items we made would decrease as inflation increases. So what's that going to lead to? Downward slope once again. So all in all, any changes in price level are going to affect everything. So changes in price level, that is inflation going up, or deflation going down. So changes in price levels are going to have changes to aggregate demand based on these three effects: wealth, interest rate, and exchange rates.